He wasn't a cabbie. He was a hunter with a roof light. He cruised the edges of the city where tired people looked for a quick ride home, pulled up with a fake meter and a quiet smile, and turned a late night into the last night. I'm Santa, and this is a true story about a man who used a taxi disguise to take lives, how he stayed invisible for far too long, and how the smallest mistakes finally blew the case open. He called himself Ethan Ward when anyone asked, but the name didn't matter. What mattered was routine. He kept the same car for years, a clean gray sedan with a cheap magnetic roof sign he ordered online. The sign glowed just enough to look official from a distance. He bought a used shirt with a faded livery patch and folded it over the passenger seat so it looked like a uniform. And he drove only when the city was tired, last train missed, last bus full, last call poured. That was his window. Ethan's method was simple and fast. He approached places with confusion built in: bus terminals after midnight, hotel alleys, the rear exits of music venues where rideshare signals were weak. He rolled to the curb, kept his hands at 10 and 2, and said, "Where to?" The tone was practiced, polite, flat, safe. Passengers gave an address. He tapped a dead meter with his finger so it clicked and glowed. When they buckled in, the locks clicked too, but that didn't register. The heater was warm. The car smelled like pine. The driver looked like a man who'd heard every story and kept them all. People relaxed. He never drove straight. He circled wide to check if anyone was watching, then took a route with a blind stretch, an industrial block, a freeway service road, a patch of trees the city hadn't developed. He had rehearsed every turn. When the car reached the dark stretch, the voice changed. Short, cold, precise. Hands on your lap. Don't move. This ride is over. Most people froze. Some asked questions. He didn't answer. A strip of tape, a plastic tie, a pressure point he'd learned from a self-defense book twisted backward. Minutes, not hours. No speeches. No drama. He wanted silence and control. Bodies vanished in places that swallowed evidence. Abandoned culverts. Dirt behind billboards waiting for new ads. The space under a footbridge where rain carried everything toward the river. He never returned to a dump site. He carried a cheap burner phone, paid cash for gas, and parked in different spots every shift. Missing person files stacked up over years, then files with tired notes. Last seen near transit, intoxication possible, no known enemies. The city shrugged. People leave. People run. People start over. That story covers a lot of sins. The first spark came from a roommate who did something small and careful. A young woman texted in a taxi, "Be home in 10, and attached a blurry photo of a roof light as a joke. She never arrived. That photo sat on a cloud account nobody checked for days because her phone died and her roommate thought she was crashing with a friend. When the family filed a report, Detective Mara Alvarez pulled everything: messages, bank pings, cameras, transit gates. The city had eyes, but not all in the right places. Still, the photo was something: an off-brand light, slightly crooked on the roof, the kind sold in online marketplaces, not issued by the licensing board. Alvarez pinned the printout above her desk and wrote one word: tilt. She visited taxi depots and asked managers if they'd seen a light like that. Most said no. One mechanic said he'd seen a few cheap lights around, but never on licensed cars. Alvarez sent a notice to patrol: report any taxi roof light that looked wrong, any meter without a tamper sticker, any driver who avoided taxi stands. It wasn't probable cause, but it was a net. Ethan didn't feel the net yet. He kept driving, kept collecting targets who looked safe to attack and easy to forget. He preferred people alone with backpacks. He disliked groups, cameras, and doormen. He never took fares from the main taxi queue. He cruised 2 blocks away and caught the ones who couldn't be bothered to walk. A bartender on closing shift. A dishwasher after the bus. A traveler who arrived late and wanted to save the hotel fee. The city makes people tired and cheap. He counted on it. He learned to stage false routes. He'd start toward the address and then miss a ramp, apologize softly, and take the frontage road. While the passenger looked down at a phone to check the map, he acted. It's fine, people said, because nice people forgive small mistakes. He used that reflex like a tool. Forgiveness kept his schedule tight. Then confidence made him sloppy. One night, he picked up a man near a stadium who wasn't as drunk as he looked. The man wore a team hoodie and nodded off, then woke as Ethan slowed near an empty warehouse. When Ethan grabbed his wrist, the man fought. Nails raked skin. The struggle lasted seconds, but it left marks. Ethan won because he had planned for resistance. The passenger hadn't. He disposed of the body behind a gravel pile and drove home with his face stinging. At his sink, he dabbed the scratches with alcohol and told himself the skin cells would rinse away. He was wrong. The body turned up when 2 contractors scouted materials at dawn. Patrol taped the scene. The medical examiner bagged the victim's hands. Under the nails were cells that belonged to a stranger with a minor arrest from years ago. Ethan Ward. The hit came back fast. Alvarez read the printout, looked at the tilted roof light on her board, and felt the pattern harden. She pushed for a warrant on Ethan's car and home, but a judge wanted more than DNA from one scene. Alvarez started to build it. She mapped missing person last sightings and drew circles around late-night hotspots. She asked transit for camera pulls and looked for recurring cars around the time people vanished. Hundreds of plates passed through those frames, but one gray sedan appeared near 3 disappearances. The plate was clean, registered to Ethan. That closed the loop. Uniforms grabbed him at a gas station 2 days later. He didn't resist. He kept his eyes on the pump as if the price was more important than the hands on his shoulders. At the precinct, he said as little as possible. He asked for a lawyer. They booked him and towed the car. Forensics took the sedan apart like a puzzle. They lifted the cheap roof light and found faint dust lines around the base because the magnet wasn't flush. They swabbed the trunk carpet and the seatbelt latches. They blue lighted the interior and photographed faint white patterns. They found the fake meter wired to nothing. Everything looked clean until it didn't. In the spare tire well, a cotton fiber matched a shirt from one victim's bedroom through household laundry detergent mix, weak by itself, stronger with context. In a plastic tub in the garage, they found zip ties that matched cut ends recovered from a drainage tunnel months earlier. Each piece was small. Together they formed something heavy. Alvarez visited families. She didn't promise closure. She asked for anything that might connect to a ride, receipts, random photos, snippets of memory. One father remembered a line his son had blurted while rushing out. "Don't worry, I'll grab a cab, cheaper than Uber." A bar manager recalled a gray sedan stopping in the alley where no licensed taxis waited. A hotel camera finally offered the gold. A clear image of a roof light with a visible chip on the corner and the same tilt as the one on Alvarez's wall. The chip appeared again in a different camera across town. That made it a signature. The prosecutor wanted certainty beyond pattern. Alvarez proposed a decoy. She placed plainclothes officers near his neighborhood after he posted bail. If Ethan tried to drive again, they would be waiting. He did. He couldn't help himself. He installed a fresh roof light, bought another burner, and returned to the circuit like a man who only understands one job. The decoy was a young detective in a hoodie alone, looking at a phone under a street lamp not far from a bus depot. Ethan coasted by, slowed, and pointed to the passenger seat. The detective got in, set an address that would lead through an industrial stretch, and let the ride begin. She kept her hand on a panic button and her eyes on Ethan's hands. He eased toward the dark road. On cue, her team boxed the car in. Sirens flared. Ethan's face locked into something flat, then angry, then empty. They pulled him out, cuffed him, and read him his rights. In the back seat, the decoy looked at the roof light and said one word into her mic, tilt. At trial, the defense tried to fracture the timeline. They argued that the roof lights were common items. They said the DNA could have transferred indirectly. They insisted that coincidences had been shaped into a story. But the story was tight. Jurors saw the notebook from Ethan's desk with dates that mirrored disappearances. They saw fuel receipts that lined up with late-night trips to places no one goes without a reason. They watched as an expert put the roof light from Ethan's garage beside the light in the hotel camera frame and traced the identical chip. They listened to the medical examiner explain the consistent pressure injuries that showed a controlled method. Ethan never spoke in court. When the guilty verdict came, he stared at the floor. The judge looked at him for a long time and sentenced him to life without parole. Families exhaled, not because anything was fixed, but because the man who took so much would never take again. That's the outcome. But to understand how the city let him operate for years, you have to see how close he stayed to normal life. He had a landlord who liked that he paid on time, a neighbor who waved when he carried groceries, a coffee shop clerk who knew his order. He didn't brag in bars. He didn't collect trophies. He kept his sins in motion, in a car that blended into 1,000 other cars. Here's how the pattern looked from inside the case, step by step, without fluff. He chose the car because it was common. Gray midsize, no bumper stickers, no dents. It belonged everywhere. He changed the plates once a year through private sales and shell registrations that looked legitimate at a glance. He kept the interior immaculate and replaced the floor mats every 6 months. In back, he carried a stain blocker spray and alcohol wipes. He was not a genius. He simply cared about the small things that keep other people from caring. He studied the city's weak spots. Taxi stands near stadiums had cameras and guards. He avoided them. He targeted the edges, a side street where rideshare drivers rarely waited, a hotel service door where a night manager let staff smoke, a sidewalk near a club where the bouncer's view didn't reach. He parked with his headlights off until someone waved, then rolled forward as if he had been passing by anyway. He wanted people to think they had chosen him, not the other way around. He aimed for passengers who were tired enough to be polite, drunk enough to be slow, but not so drunk they would vomit. Small details guided him: unsteady hands, slumped shoulders, the way someone leaned alone against a wall. If a group hailed him, he kept going. If 2 people argued whether to split a ride, he looked for the one who gave up and walked away. That was the sweet spot, the person who felt like a burden and wanted to stop feeling that way. Inside the car, he used language to take control. Seatbelt, he said as if it were a rule, not a suggestion. People obeyed rules. He kept the radio low so silence felt normal. When he needed the victim distracted, he faked a navigation issue and told them to check the map. The moment eyes dropped to the phone, he acted. He didn't give speeches or threats. He created a funnel where panic had nowhere to go. He carried a kit in the trunk, ties, tape, gloves, and 2 clean blankets. He put everything into a plain gym bag with a broken zipper so it looked like junk. In the spare tire well, he kept a second kit in case the first was ever found. He bought supplies from stores outside his zip code and paid cash. He never purchased in bulk. Nothing about his behavior would alert a clerk. Dump sites rotated by quadrant: Northwest Industrial, East Riverbank, South Scrub, West Construction lots. He kept a paper map with 4 circles marked faintly in pencil. He didn't return to a site in the same month. He drove the long way home to make sure no one followed. He parked a block from his apartment and walked. He washed the car in self-serve bays at odd hours. He was careful, and that was enough to keep him hidden until it wasn't. The small failures piled up. The crooked roof light, the scratched face, the DK ride, the notebook with date codes only he understood, the fiber from a victim's home. None of these items proved murder alone. Together, they etched a path through the fog. Alvarez said something in a briefing I won't forget: "Predators count on us being disconnected." She pushed connection. She merged missing person lists across precincts, made one board, and fought the habit of treating each absence like a personal story with no links. Once the board filled with pins and strings, the gaps shrank. You could trace Ethan's route like a slow orbit around the city. It changed the mood in the room. Detectives stopped waiting for a miracle and started looking for a car with a slightly crooked sign. The arrest didn't feel cinematic. It felt like work landing where work is supposed to land. The decoy signaled. The cars surrounded. Hands reached through the window and found a driver who had no more moves. In his glove box sat a folded printout of taxi regulations with the important parts highlighted: fines, inspections, and how to avoid them. He had studied the rulebook like a thief studies a floor plan. Why am I telling you all this? Because the case looks like a monster story until you list the parts. None of the parts are special. That's the horror and the lesson. A cheap light. A quiet tone. A city that assumes the ride with the roof sign is safe because it looks like the ones your parents used. Evil didn't need a costume. It needed a decal and a routine. The families never got speeches from Ethan. He didn't apologize. He didn't explain motive beyond the vague words defense lawyers float when they have nothing: anger, control, a need to feel important. The truth was smaller. He liked being the person who decided whether someone made it home. He liked the space between one red light and the next, when he could take a turn nobody expected. That's not complicated. It's cruel. After the sentencing, the city installed new signs at bus depots and club exits. Check the plate. Photograph the roof light. Verify the name. Rideshare apps added a banner reminding users to match the car and driver every time. Taxi authorities cracked down on counterfeit gear. Bars printed reminders on receipts. The changes came late for the families in the gallery, but they came. I said I'd keep this direct, and I will. The man is gone. The method is not. If a ride feels wrong, it probably is. That's not paranoia. That's survival. Don't hand your safety to a stranger because the roof glows. That was the death taxi. A fake cab, a patient predator, a case that took too long to connect, and a set of tiny mistakes that finally brought him down. I'm Santa, and this has been a true story told without sugarcoating and without filler, exactly as a warning should be told. If you liked this story and don't want to miss the next episode, subscribe to the channel and give the video a like to support the work. Tell me in the comments what kind of true story you want next.